in my vision of what the world looks like in 20 years, we've moved from kind of the sustainability or trying to get there to actually moving to flourishing, when we're really doing good and creating a world and an environment where people are working hard and flourishing. I think back to like 15 years ago, there'd be requirements, for example, to have a degree. And actually, I don't think that is a requirement for a particular job. Actually, lived experience is more than sufficient in many instances. So it's the wording, the format of the way you put out your job advertisement, trying to attract people and understanding that people are going to bring lots of different perspectives. Having quite regimented criteria in your job advertisement, that might not be the way to do it. You should have diversity at the C-suite level. You should have diversity, bringing conversations where you're coming up with future strategies and bring those voices into those discussions, into those workshops and get those ideas. I think people would be amazed at how much more you can generate when you're bringing diversity into that group. Looking back through history, perhaps there hasn't been that diversity at the C-suite level. And I think it's really important.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you very much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing at Mima?
Brilliant. So yes, I'm Lisa Baker. I was born in Zimbabwe, so in Bulawayo, and I grew up there, spent some time in Kenya and South Africa. I studied an undergrad in human factors and inclusive design. I moved over to the UK to continue some further studies. So I did a master's at Loughborough University and have spent the last, I suppose, about 18 years now in the field of experience design, service design, and inclusive design. And at Mima, I lead the experience design and sustainability team, and that's working across projects, services, systems, and spaces to make them more inclusive. So really kind of trying to dial up the social aspect of sustainability.
What does sustainability mean to you?
I think sustainability is about kind of balance. So ensuring that while you're growing, you're balancing and trying to innovate, you're balancing that and not at the expense of people or the planet. So trying to think about, I suppose, the triple bottom line. So about, it's about making money, obviously, and doing well in business, but also looking after people, not doing any harm, actually moving on to kind of flourishing. So as the kind of the end goal and what, the evolution of sustainability is. So that people are, living brilliant lives and we're helping to contribute, to that as businesses, and also not doing any damage to the planet as well, really importantly.
So you look at sustainability as the starting point for moving forward?
I do, yeah. So there's obviously frameworks and guidance and ways that kind of business can kind of have that starting point, but trying to think about what the future is and in my vision of what the world looks like in 20 years, we've moved from kind of the sustainability or trying to get there to actually moving to flourishing, when we're really doing good and creating a world and an environment where people are, working hard and flourishing and their communities are flourishing as well. So yeah, it's very much a starting point, I think, on a journey to a better planet and helping the people in it.
So you mentioned inclusivity and accessibility there, and I think we could both agree that both are pretty critical for sustainable growth. What I'm interested in is, do you have any viewpoints on how business leaders can create environments that can attract and support different types of people, whether it's partners or colleagues or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think for businesses, it should always start with actively recruiting, listening to and including diverse voices in all decision making. So in all the kind of the services and the space that we design, we talk to people with lived experience. It's crucial to understand their pain points, what their barriers are, obviously co-creating together to come up with solutions and innovations and ideas, understanding what their wish list is, and together you create those solutions, because we'll always have our own biases from our own backgrounds, but actually it's kind of more diversity and more thoughts, and from different people's backgrounds and experiences, whether that's disabled people and people of low social income, older people. Everyone brings a diverse perspective with their own kind of pain points and their own life experience, which really, should help inform. And actually it's not only great because it creates accessibility and inclusivity, but it actually leads to kind of better ideas. Usually when you have different perspectives, it leads to that diversity of ideas. So I'd say that's kind of the first thing, really kind of listening to and making sure that you bring that lived experience, that voice into any services, spaces, systems that you're designing.
I want to explore both sides of that, actually. So something that I've come across with a lot of sustainability companies is they struggle to recruit people. Do you have any advice on how people can improve their recruiting, but also make it more diverse to get different types of people into their company?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's a few things that we try to do with recruitment to make it more accessible. We're lucky that we have an in-house accessibility team that are able to look to see actually, first and foremost, the format that you put out your advertisement to recruit people has got to be inclusive. I think back to like 15 years ago, there'd be requirements, for example, to have a degree. And actually, I don't think that is a requirement, for a particular job. Actually, lived experience is more than, sufficient in many instances. So, it's the wording, the format of the way you put out your job advertisement, trying to attract people and, understanding that people are going to bring lots of different perspectives. So having quite regimented, I guess, criteria in your job advertisement, that might not be the way to do it. So yeah, try and, if you can, develop that, co-create that job advertisement with someone with a different perspective or diverse background to you. I think that's really quite helpful. So we often get disabled people to help us kind of with our job advertisements and to actually, does it read well? Could it be understood by people with different access requirements? And bringing in all those kind of just those different ideas from a lived experience group.
And then the other side of it, I guess the more sort of culture side. How can business leaders do a better job of including those voices in their company culture and helping them shape strategy and work?
There's a lot of ideas that we've taken from the B impact assessment. So in our own journey towards B Corp, things like staff engagement surveys and seeing kind of what that yields. And it's almost like harvesting all those brilliant ideas that people have got. And often that comes, again, in a forum where you've allowed people to come up and generate those ideas. So maybe your staff engagement survey isn't designed to get very quantitative results out of it, although obviously that can help. But, having the space to give feedback in a way that's not regimented in a tick box. And that way you can get those voices brought in. And, I think that you should have, diversity at the C-suite level. You should have diversity, bringing conversations where you're coming up with, future strategies and bring those voices into those discussions, into those workshops and get those ideas. I mean, I think people would be amazed at how much more you can generate when you're bringing diversity into that group. Looking back through history, perhaps there hasn't been that diversity at the C-suite level. And I think it's really important because people will bring such a fresh perspective and such brilliant ideas. And yeah, that's hugely valuable.
You mentioned before about sustainability being balance more than anything and moving towards flourishing. And so one of the things that I've noticed as well, talking to different business leaders in sustainability, is there tends to be a really difficult juggling act they have between growth and sustainability. So like financial growth, increasing the amount of impacts they have, but also creating both a sustainable business in terms of financially sustainable, but also ecologically, socially sustainable.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on how leaders can do a better job of balancing that? Because I've found they tend to tip really hard one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conundrum. I think it's something, as you said, it's a problem that a lot of leaders kind of face and businesses face. I think firstly, you have to prioritize value creation kind of over those short-term gains to ensure that sustainability becomes part of your growth strategy, incorporating environmental and social metrics into your performance measures. So at Mima, we have what we call Mima metrics. So it's a kind of process that we have with our clients. So at the beginning of like projects, we look to see what is the actual long-term value creation that you want, because we'll be there for a short period of time, doing consultancy, whatever, but it's actually, understanding from them what is the kind of that North Star, what is your vision, what is the long-term value that you want to create, and trying to see then what are those measures that you will need to get there, environmentally, socially, the governance measures as well, so kind of all the ESG part of sustainability. So it's just trying to balance that and think of the long-term value creation that you want to have.
So we talked about culture there and sustainability, and I think a big part of a leader's job is to educate their team, lead their team, obviously, but also to educate them as they learn more, as the business learns more. What practical steps would you say a leader can take to inspire and educate their teams and embed those sustainability values into their culture, whether or not they're a sustainability first company?
I'd say educating through storytelling. So it's a technique that we love within design, sharing real world examples of how sustainable practices have made a difference and truly make a difference. We have examples of work that we've done. For example, last year we did a lovely project with Forestry England, looking at how to make their forests more inclusive. So looking at how we've got such wonderful green spaces and forests within England, and how do we get people to use those right now with the climate crisis and mental health crisis. We want people to be going and moving around forests and enjoying the beautiful greenery and that connection with nature. But there are a lot of barriers actually to a lot of people accessing forests at the moment and utilizing those, whether it's older people or disabled people and the paths aren't geared, for example, wheelchair users, whatever it might be. So through the end of that project, we've been able to share, storytell how we changed and looked at an end-to-end journey of that experience, identified all the barriers, the pain points, spoke to communities, lots of different communities who might want to use the forest, spoke to them about their ideas of how to improve that. And that has been used as a great way to share a story and tell a story of how you can make those changes and embedding sustainability within all of those things. What is the improvement to the community, to people at an individual level, how that connection to nature helps with the environment, and we're looking after the environment. So yeah, storytelling is really good. Setting clear, measurable goals. Again, the B impact assessment's been a wonderful light for us to be able to help set those goals. I think creating champions within your, the workplace and within business, identifying passionate team members who can really advocate for sustainability initiatives. So we have loads of those at Mima. And from also different perspectives, different sides of sustainability. We have the vegan warriors who represent the environmental aspects, and we've got people who are disability advocates. So it might be different champions within the sustainability umbrella, but creating those champions and getting ideas from them as well. And then obviously leading by example. Your leaders need to demonstrate commitment to sustainable behaviors, and that'll obviously inspire teams to kind of follow suit.
So you mentioned educative storytelling there, and I think that's quite an interesting one for me. I think it's such a big part of marketing, especially if you're marketing a sustainable solution. People tend to not engage with sustainability when it doesn't speak to their lived experience. If you're talking about something that they can engage with, that they can touch, they can feel, that they understand, instead of saying there's a biodiversity crisis, link it back to bees. Talk about how bees are being affected and they're a big part of our food chain. Like, educative storytelling is such a good hack for any kind of communication.
And, it's how we communicate with our children. In fact, through history, through millennia, humans have passed down brilliant pieces of advice through storytelling, going back to around the fireside, like 2,000 years ago, to now how we pass stories on through kind of families and generations. And it's such an important part of being human. And I think it's so important. And we learn things. It's what you remember. If you go back to your childhood and your school days, you'll remember the best stories that you were told, whether it's something that happened in the playground and someone saw something happen or whatever. Those are the things that we remember. It's the human body. Our brains are kind of very wired to remember stories, and absolutely, like you said, stories that are applicable and relatable to us. I think there's a good piece, in being able to tell a good story. It's a skill, you have to master that kind of storytelling, but it's such an important thing from a marketing perspective, from a company perspective, to be able to tell that story. I think B Corps, there are some brilliant examples of things that people have done through storytelling. I think of like Tony's Chocolonis as a brilliant example on their wrapper. Just the kind of the way that the chocolate's broken up, and it just tells such a powerful story. And it's such a way to engage their audience, and people kind of get that at the beginning, what they're trying to do, what their mission is, what they're trying to change in the world. And it's beautifully done. Story can be verbal, but it can also be communicated through really good design as well. But it's something that's really essential, and that really helps embed that thinking and create that impact.
I'm a massive Joseph Campbell nerd, so I could talk about storytelling and like shared storytelling for a very long time, which I won't do on this call. But yeah, the Tony's Chocolonely one is an interesting one for me as well, because that's a really good example of a brand taking brand all the way through their product. So for example, you'll have some companies that think just the logo and the name is their brand, but actually a brand is so much more than that. It's the promise that you make to people. It's the strategy behind everything that you do. It's the product itself that people interact with and use. In this case, the chocolate bar.
Yeah. Patagonia for me is another example of just a brilliant brand that, just do everything. They are my kind of reference point of what a brilliant brand is for being sustainable and just truly caring about the planet and people and the whole supply chain and everything that they do. I have so much trust in that brand as a sustainable brand trying to properly change the world and kind of drive change. There are some really good examples of brands where you just have so much faith in that, about what they're doing. And I think that's important, that we have that trust and that people can get behind brands that they trust, because that kind of really helps drive sustainability forward and towards flourishing.
I want to touch on the B Corp thing then. So obviously certifications like that can help companies grow, but a lot of the time people seem to find them, they are overwhelming. They touch on a lot of different areas of your business and help you understand pieces that you might not have seen before. So I was speaking to Rob from When in Rome Wine recently about this.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying going through the B Corp certification showed him areas of his business he never even thought about before. So I'm really interested to hear from you what lessons you've learned going through that process that you could give to other businesses that might want to go for it or might just want to become more sustainable without having to go for it.
I'm excited to chat about this. So certainly discovering the B Corp movement has transformed my perspective. It's really shown how collective efforts and supporting purpose-driven brands can really amplify that impact exponentially. I always felt like beforehand, you do small things, but it never felt like it had the reach. Whereas now, if I buy Tony's, or I buy, who gives a crap blue paper or whatever it might be, I just know that even though I'm buying something and it's a product and it's still creating value along the way, so I'm doing something good at every point. And in terms of starting the B Corp process and the B impact assessment, it can feel quite daunting at the beginning because it feels like there's a lot to do, but it's an extremely powerful framework. And I think that can help your kind of business area. Like you said, there's so many aspects of it. You can use it as a guiding light. So start small, focus on kind of maybe small, quick wins, areas that you can make immediate improvements while you're planning for those kind of longer changes. And you can almost see that as the little drop-down menu that you've got there. For example, maternity leave, you can pay like X amount of months of paid paternity leave, but actually that it'll move down and every single step along that way is like more impact, more change. So it's almost a timeline, each of the answers of what you're doing to how you can improve. So it kind of give you that vision for what the longer term change could be and should be. I think it's quite a good diagnostic tool to see where you are at the moment. So kind of baseline where you are right now, and then looking at it to identify gaps, and then saying what are those opportunities for improvement, using those lists to say, okay, right now we're over here, but actually what we really want to be is, down here. And actually that helps you. Another thing to do is to get more people involved in it. So give licenses. So when you sign up to the B impact assessment, get your champions that I talked about. So get them on board, give them access as well so they can look and get ideas of how you could change things. So really engage your team early on. One of the things that we did is had a mirror board, so our B Corp wall, as we called it, and so everyone's got access to that. They can see what we're doing. They put down ideas on a post-it of things that we can change. We're constantly looking to see how we can improve. It's not an end point; it's a journey along the way. If there is an end point, it's flourishing. That's the kind of the goal of where we want to be. It's not a finish line. It's a continuous journey, and the whole time towards kind of better practices, greater impact. Start it. I'd say that's my advice. Like no matter how daunting it might seem, just start it, see where you are, and it'll help you. It'll guide you through.
I'm interested to hear what were some of the highest leverage things you could do to improve that score.
Oh, one of the things that certainly carries a lot of points, obviously you need 80 points as a minimum to certify, is changing kind of the company articles, the whole ethos of what your company is, to make it about being sustainable. So we got our company articles changed, and that obviously carries a lot of weight, and it's one of the key impact areas. We made so many changes from when we started in improvement, and the thing was just like, right, that's the first change. It was always like, right, what's the next thing we can do? For example, even calculating scope emissions. So we've calculated our scope 1 and 2, and we're monitoring those. And now the next thing is scope 3 emissions, which is obviously, as you know, a much greater beast to tackle. But you're like, right, by the time we recertify, I want that done, and I want us to be in a position where we're publishing that. And so there's always just what's the next thing that we can do to kind of create impact and be better. It's always reaching for the next thing. Where we are, it's good, but it's not the end.
Moving on to leadership, what do you think is one key principle that is essential for businesses that want to become more sustainable? We mentioned there about teaching, inspiring, leading, but when it comes to the actual practice or the principle, the concrete action that a leadership team can do, what would that be?
Can I cheat and say two things? I think humility and adaptability, listening to feedback. So that's from your employees, your customers, your stakeholders. Be willing to evolve your strategies. And again, bringing that lived experience. I bang on that drum quite a lot, but it's so important. And I think empathy and compassion, you need to understand the needs of your community, your stakeholders, to ensure that your growth is aligning with their priorities as well. It's going back to what's changing the company articles. It's about thinking about, how that's helping and creating value and, helping with your community or whoever your customers are, whatever your business is, that value creation for them as well. I think transparency is another key one. And we talk obviously a lot about transparency within sustainability, but be open about your goals, be open about where you are right now. We're on the journey as well, but we are progressing and building that trust and accountability along the way. I think it's really important. Referencing Patagonia again, they are so transparent and it's refreshing to see that honesty. I feel like the businesses that are greenwashing are not transparent, but it's actually saying we're not perfect, but we are trying to be better and we're trying to do as much as we can. And I think that's really quite important. I suppose collaboration would be another one, working with your suppliers, other businesses, communities to amplify that collective impact. I'd say that those were the things. Not one. I've given you more than one.
It's interesting you say transparency, though. I think that's one of the big things, right? Is so many companies that have been accused of greenwashing either way, it's because they lack transparency. They're not showing the things that they are saying they have done. Yeah. And I think data is such a key part of that. They need to gather that data and they need to tell it in a way that tells that story.
Oh, and back to storytelling, yes.
My final question for you then, if you had one piece of advice for another sustainability company, what would it be?
If you're not already subscribed to the B Impact Assessment, that is such a guiding framework. I would say download it today, sign up and start, because that is just such a way to guide you. Even if you don't have any in-house sustainability expertise, that could be a self-guided way to cut your way through. And you can just see as you start to rack up the points, making the changes, and every one of those little changes, is making a difference and making your organization better. So, without focusing on the points too much, I mean, you need them obviously to get the certification, but, think of it as every single little change I'm making is improving the business. And that's going to make, you as a business more sustainable.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.